one of the things we were talking about 30 years of evolution of the profession, or almost 30 years of evolution. But one of the things that we still see is that there is a huge amount of successful preachers all the time. I think one can ask, so what are we doing as an industry? Are we successful? And what can we do better or different? And that's one of those points of view that kept me once again interested in the profession.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Hello and welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I'm so excited to be here today with Ophir Zilbiger, who heads BDO's global cybersecurity practice for BDO International, working with BDO firms and the Cybersecurity Leadership Group to develop and grow BDO's cybersecurity practice around the world. He heads BDO Israel Cybersecurity Center, helping organizations to manage their cybersecurity risk and build their risk-based defense. His IT and cybersecurity experience spans over 25 years, in which he worked with organizations of various industries, size, and geography, with C-suite and board members, as well as technology, IT, and cybersecurity leaders. Ophir Zilbiger, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Thanks very much. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
It's awesome to be here with you, Ophir. Few people have such an impressive background and a rigorous journey in a specific field and domain, especially one that has emerged and has, transcended in such a meaningful way as a part of our society, of our economics, of our politics, of our social norms. And this is, of course, the cybersecurity space, which is a fascinating one because of its evolution, because of the challenges that it presents still today, and some of the ways that it happens. And you've had, quite a significant arm on the very hands-on piece of it, on the advisory piece of it, on the high-level thinking, strategic thinking, but all the way down to the ground and to the technical details. And so today, partner and head of BDO Cyber of BDO Israel and global cyber leader at BDO. And really a pleasure for me to pick your brain in these 20 minutes, and I'm excited to learn. Tell me first a little bit about your own journey from your perspective, and then I'd love to dive into the evolution of cyber from the way that you've perceived it.
So I started my own journey right in the right timing, so to speak. It was just before internet became commercial. So right before we started facing these challenges that we're seeing today as huge challenges, but in the past, they grew slowly but surely. And I've had the opportunity to really be a part of the people who built the internet as an infrastructure and as a phenomena, I would say. Of course, not in a very significant role, but I've had the pleasure of really experiencing things firsthand as they matured, as they were developed or even invented. And that gave me an interesting perspective of this profession. I've been doing security since '97. So hands-on, I could see the sort of evolution that took place. So I started as a technical person, and at a certain point in time, I joined one of the big consulting firms, learned how to take the technical knowledge into a more business language, which requires a lot of in-depth understanding of risk management, which is a very important foundation of our profession today. I'll get to that maybe a bit later. And then I had the opportunity to develop or to start a company in cyber security. It was called information security in the past. And then another company, which led me to BDO, who acquired that company in 2016. So that's my own journey. I think to start with, maybe we can touch this phenomena of cybersecurity in Israel. I think, as I work with clients and organizations around the world, everyone knows that cybersecurity is a sort of a phenomena in Israel with a lot of innovation. And, Startup Nation is not about cyber, but it is a part of that phenomena. And I think when you look at the Israeli ecosystem, what's happening here is really we see lots and lots of cybersecurity related innovation coming out because a lot of people are dealing with cybersecurity challenges, whether it's from a security or defense perspective or from an offense perspective, as they are part of the intelligence corps or the army itself. And that happens in various countries around the world. This accelerated innovation development, which is highly influenced by the military here in Israel, is hitting the doors of clients. If you can imagine, the largest banks in Israel, for instance, they've been working with startups that present very innovative solutions very early on. And because cyber is such a dynamic threat, clients are not afraid of using startup or even, immature technology to help them with some of those challenges. What's happening then is that the CISOs of these organizations are getting more and more mature in terms of solutions that they're seeing out of the market and how they can implement those solutions. The regulators see that. The consultants have to chase the expertise of the client sometimes. And that creates a whole lot of sort of self-feeding innovation circle that everyone is involved with and everyone is influencing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why the Israeli innovation ecosystem is working very well for startups and also for understanding, the main challenges. And that's one of the reasons why when you speak with Israeli organizations, to some extent, you see a higher level of maturity in information security or cybersecurity. In average, of course, there are many organizations around the world that have a lot of that have a high level of maturity. But as an average, I think this ecosystem is quite unique.
That's interesting. And so you're tying in, the way that the country is unfolding and a lot of the different factors that are pushing into it. If you're looking at the way that cyber is formed from an evolution of a category perspective, do you consider it a healthy evolution? Do you consider it, how do you perceive it now from the side looking back, sort of both from a knowledge perspective, a business perspective, a globalized perspective? How well did we do here?
See, the security started really in the 80s. It started before the internet became this a significant phenomena with digital life all around us. We started out with very simple things like making sure that people have a password to access the mainframe. Or set of permissions that are appropriate to certain data sets. These challenges have been with us for a very long time. The internet brought huge amounts of new challenges from technology perspective, and most of those were fairly new technologies that the organizations, even though the technologies themselves, like TCP/IP, for instance, have been there for quite a long time, organizations have never used them, definitely not in a commercial sense. Universities had more experience, but the world started to adopt the internet in a very, very fast, accelerated motion, and that created huge amounts of challenges from a technical perspective. And those challenges were thrown at the IT people in the beginning. And I was one of those IT people with network expertise and operating systems expertise. And all of a sudden, you have an internet gateway with a router that connects you to the internet, and everything is exposed. And then you need to start realizing how. I remember the first time I was breached or my network was breached. I was a young system administrator, and it was around 98. And someone, it was a very, very simple way that they breached us. It was purely technical, by the way. It wasn't human-based. And that led us to understanding that we needed a firewall. Before we had a firewall, we had a very simple mechanism of trying to sort out which communication is allowed and which is not. A firewall is a tool that can do that for a bigger scale organization with the appropriate policy that is compatible with a dynamic organization. So in the beginning, really, the focus was very technical. There was no governance. There was no, we didn't use risk management. We didn't use any of the methods that we use today. It was sporadic and dependent on technical people. And that was the case since around the internet commercialization in 94, 95, and all the way to a very important point in time, which led to the second wave of evolution of the profession. That point in time is the collapse of Enron in 2002, 3. All that around that time, the collapse of Enron created the need for new legislation, which was eventually called SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, which is still very apparent today in many of the things that the organizations are doing, definitely in IT, but not only in IT. And Sarbanes-Oxley started a period of time of about 10 years in which the main focus, or even I would say the only focus, was compliance. People were people were focused on being compliant to Sarbanes-Oxley, to SOX. SOX had very strong teeth in terms of, how a regulator or a legislator can influence an organization, because it held with personal responsibility the CEO and the CFO if they don't meet the requirements. And that's why every organization was very busy with that. And that also led to a period of time where all of the vendors that created technology solutions for security sold those solutions from a compliance perspective or from a SOX perspective. Now, during these 10 years between 2002, 3, and up until around 2012, 13, and maybe globally even longer, by 2015, by the time we started talking about cyber and not information security, people were involved or mostly focused on being compliant. Now, the problem with compliance is that it doesn't have anything to do with effectiveness. It really has to do with, checking the box. Do we have that document on the shelf? And it's less about whether we implemented the process effectively. Although SOX does that in many respects, but in security, because it's such a detailed profession with so much technical data and influence, the people that were dealing with SOX were mostly engaged in implementing, or not actually implementing, but making sure that the controls, SOX controls, exist. But the people who actually did the day-to-day security were still the technical people, and they didn't. And there was a very big disconnect between the compliance level that the organization was reflecting outbound and the day-to-day operation that the IT people did on their network. Opening up a firewall rule or limiting a server in terms of functionality to make sure that it's more secure. All of that day-to-day technical work was not really connected to the level of compliance that the organizations were reflecting. This created a huge gap in security, in practical security. Now, the reason why we haven't seen this gap in the early years, 2002, 3, and then onwards until the end of that period, is because the threat levels were not really there yet. The threat actors that we see operating in the past 10 years, since that beginning of the cyber domain or cyber world and up until today, the threat level is so much higher. And organizations are seeing real business impacts, which we haven't seen in the past because the criminals were not ready yet or not mature. But those 10 years allowed the criminals to get a lot more maturity. Organizations were lagging in terms of implementing security. So if you ask me, the third level of, or the third period of time in that evolution is the period of time where we talk about cyber is really about effectiveness and less about compliance. And there's also a very important point to make here, which is, if you remember those intelligence corps or military people that I was talking about before, when they go out to the market, they bring some military thinking. And the profession started with technical and compliance people, but when we started seeing critical mass of military thinkers infused into cyber business around the world. And we're seeing that in Israel, but we're seeing that in the US and in the UK and other places as well. This created a fusion of two different streams of development of the profession. One stream was focused on IT, business, risk, and compliance. And the other stream was really involved with information warfare. It was about how do we hack into terrorist organizations to understand what they want to do, what are the intentions, how do we collect intelligence. And then these military thinkers who were experts in offensive security, because of those needs to collect intelligence, etc., had a very interesting and unique perspective on how to defend an organization. This infusion of these two routes to go, the first and the military paradigm, created a new view or a new way of defending organizations. And one example that is quite practical and simple to understand is, if we look back at the compliance landscape, and one of the standards that are globally adopted in cybersecurity is ISO 27001, or in the past it actually started as a pretty standard with the number 7799 a long time ago. This standard didn't have the word intelligence in it at all, because it wasn't part of the profession, in terms of how we thought about it in the past. Today, cyber intelligence is a key element in any defense program. And intelligence is a military thing. Intelligence is something that the military doesn't do anything without, not acquisition, not training, and definitely not any kind of operation. So we're seeing this fusion between these two professions today at a very high level of maturity. And I'm actually curious about the next phase of evolution that we'll probably see sometime in the next few years.
That was so cool. That was a really, really cool background. I took a lot of notes myself, so thank you, Ophir, for that. I'm coming from the cyber background, and you opened up new avenues for me to consider as I reflect on what happened before I was in the background. Right, you took me all the way back to Enron, legislations, SOGs, effectiveness, compliance, to today, emerging challenges, and what's happening now. I want to leverage the last few minutes to get to know you a little bit better, because obviously you've been thinking a lot about this space for a long time, and so you're interested in it. You're living it. Tell me why. What is it? Why are you so interested in the cyberspace over the last 30 years?
For me personally, it was based on first of all my passion to technology, which was always there. I had a very natural connection to, let's say, how IT works for some reason. I don't know why. And then my biggest challenge throughout these long years was to create a way for me to talk about technology with top management who usually, if you look back, especially, did not have any internet background. These older people that were managing organizations 20 years ago when I was starting out my career, they didn't understand internet. They didn't understand the threats. And we had to speak with a different language with them in order to make sure that they both understand the threat and also can support us in the challenges. So one of the things that I think kept me sort of interested in the profession is this ability to speak with top management, to understand business challenges. As a technical person, it took me a long time to connect to the business world properly and to understand how, business looks like at a macro level, from a CEO perspective, from a board perspective, all the way down to the CISO. And I think one of the biggest recommendations I can give in terms of how to really connect to those business people is using risk language. Risk is sort of like a common denominator between different parts of an organization. And when you talk about risk, you actually talk about the business, you talk about what could go wrong in financial terms, or at least in probability and qualitative impact terms, like high, medium, or low. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a millions figure. And that creates, once again, a common denominator in terms of language between different parts of the organization. And you can start comparing the level of risk that different parts of the organizations can be exposed to. And also, you can start comparing different kinds of risks and start prioritizing those based on the level of risk that the management sees at each area. we talked about compliance, for instance. I see compliance as something that is a very significant risk for some organizations, definitely ones that can suffer a big fine if they're not compliant or even go out of business because they're not meeting some sort of regulatory or other requirements. But compliance is a very different risk from cybersecurity. Cyber is a risk that can lead to huge impact, financial impact or reputational impact. Usually compliance risk is less impactful from cyber risk. But in any case, those are two different risks that need to be managed separately. I think another point of view here is if in terms of my interest with the profession is really to help organizations make sure that they build the right defenses and be resilient as much as they can to a cyber breach. And one of the things we were talking about 30 years of evolution of the profession, or almost 30 years of evolution. But one of the things that we still see is that there is a huge amount of successful breaches all the time. And I think one can ask, so what are we doing as an industry? Are we successful? And what can we do better or different? And that's one of those points of view that kept me once again interested in the profession.
I am already inviting you to a whole episode just on that topic. 20 minutes is not nearly enough, and I have already a few pages of notes here. And I really want to thank you, Ophir, for coming on. And it's so clear how meticulous you are and how rigorous you've been thinking about these things. And the journey that you took me on is not just a journey of facts and figures, but it's a journey of deep understanding of the different figures in the market, the factors of how these different stakeholders are playing with and against each other, and then how evolutionarily we've grown to understand the landscape and how different players are interacting. And it's definitely a conversation that's going to leave me thinking more. So thank you again, Ophir, for coming on and being a part of this show. I look forward to sharing it, and I already am looking forward to our next episode talking about challenges ahead. Thank you.
So many thanks to you for inviting me. It was a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Ophir. Thank you.